Okay, we'll start in a couple minutes. For those of you still out in the atrium, why don't you go ahead and make your way in? That'd be great. We have some empty seats up front here, so please, if you can't find a spot up near the rear of the auditorium, feel free to move on down. Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started with my introductory comments, and that should put us right on schedule for our first presentation today. Well, I want to thank you so very much for being here again to our Caring for a Person with Memory Loss conference. We are just so thrilled to have you here, as we are every year. It's so great to see so many familiar faces, but also really wonderful to see many people who are here at the conference for the first time. How many of you are here at the conference for the first time? Oh, wow, that's great. Wow, that's a big group of people, so this is wonderful. So really appreciate it. I think the people who have been here are sitting still in the atrium. They probably heard this already, so they'll come back in later. They've heard these intro comments many times. So just a quick summary of what the goals of this conference are. Our goal of this conference is not necessarily to provide you a technical, scientific, academic series of presentations, although certainly science will be referred to, and a lot of what we're talking about certainly is evidence-based. But it's really to provide you with tools, educational, hands-on, that can help you care for someone with memory loss, whether you're a family member or whether you're a professional as well. And that's kind of how this conference has evolved over time. We really want to emphasize the information we're providing to you has day-to-day utility and is high quality as well. And this has kind of been the mantra we've lived by ever since we started this conference. A key thing about this conference is it's driven by you. And when I mean audience-driven content is that for those of you, I think all of you should have a folder. You'll see we have an evaluation form in there. We take that extremely seriously, not just in terms of how well did you like every presentation and such, but then also your open-ended comment for suggestions for future speakers, because I actually rely on that when I assemble the agenda each year. So definitely take that serious. Please do try to fill that out, and I'll be reminding you about that throughout the day. Okay, in terms of the history of the conference, it's really experienced quite a bit of growth. The first conference we did was way back in May 2008. It doesn't seem like that's that long ago. It certainly doesn't seem like it to me. But when we actually promoted that conference, it was simply done by word of mouth, and we had 90 people show up at the door. And really, since then, we have been more or less, as time has grown by, as we've gotten better with promotion, of course, and the word of mouth has spread, we generally get around, I'd say on average, 250 people here each year, and that's probably how many we're going to have today based on how full I see the auditorium right now. Those of you walking in, please, there's some empty spots up front. Please take a seat. We hold it the Saturday after Memorial Day each year, and if you've attended, you are on our email list, and we will inform you each year, so that'll be great. Okay. It's hard to believe this is our 10th year of the conference. Can you believe it? So isn't that something? Wow, I can't believe it. So, I mean, obviously, I've been at every conference, but I'm kind of curious. So, how many of you have been to 2 conferences? How many to 3? 4? A couple people have been to 4. I know, Mr. Chodek, you've been to at least 7. So, I know that. So, yeah, that's what I thought. So, now, if you recall in the past, the reason why I say it's our 14th conference, we used to also have a winter conference, and we did that for the first couple years, but we kind of felt like it was best to just marshal our efforts and time to this particular summer conference. For those of you that are adept at using the computer and don't mind using it, I really want to point this resource out to you. We have, really since 2010, we've been recording the conference presentations. And so they're available back then, plus all of the conference materials, etc. They're all available at this virtual library conference link. And that's on the conference webpage, but I also wanted to provide it to you here as well. You can search by date as well by topic, okay? All right, let's talk about the important things, which are logistics and restrooms. I think many of you have asked me about this already. So the restrooms are actually out back rear to the right. So that's where the restrooms are. You've noticed many of the sitting areas already. There's this nice big atrium here. During lunchtime as well, if it's okay in terms of temperature-wise, there are many seating areas outside here. And then actually, if you go down one level, there's a nice big atrium to sit out there as well. So there's a lot of places to sit outside if you want. I'm going to ask the speakers, although this shouldn't be necessary, we're going to have floating mics in the audience, so when we get to question and answers for speakers, please do wait for a microphone to come to you, because that way that's picked up by the recording. But if not, if someone just happens to shout out a question, for those of you who are speakers here, please do remember to repeat the question. Food and refreshments have been available, and they'll be available throughout the day, so please help yourselves. Finally, in your handouts, you're going to see 2 forms there for you. One are what are called the registry forms. We use these forms. One of the things we do as part of this conference and our ongoing engagement efforts is, if you are interested in learning more about the various studies that we're doing, please do feel free to fill out that registry form. And if you've done one in the past and you have to update it, definitely update it as well. Because what that does is it gives us permission then to contact you to tell you about some of the various studies we have going on. And there's actually 2 main studies I wanted to talk to you about here today. One is, and you've heard me talk about this the last couple years, is we're around 3/4 of the way done, but we are still conducting our study on remote health monitoring technology for people with memory loss living at home and their families. This is where, if you're randomly assigned, you get to utilize this sensor technology, we call it remote activity monitoring technology, for free in the home for 18 months. If you want to learn more about that, the Lutheran Home Association exhibit, they actually will show you the sensors, and you can talk to Sharon Bloom there, and she could tell you more about the system itself. If that's a study you think you might be eligible for and are interested about, please feel free to fill out what's called the documentation of permission form. Again, you'll see that in your handouts. I'm going to be reminding you about this throughout the day. There's a second study we're doing too. My research assistant, Quinn Maroney, is in the forum room. That's where all the exhibitors are. We actually are doing this really interesting study on facial recognition technology. It's basically like a watch or a phone. It can recognize people's faces, and if someone has it, say someone has memory concerns and they don't necessarily remember who they're talking to, who they're with, the app can actually tell them who they're talking to based on facial recognition. It's kind of a cool little study that we're doing. We're still looking for participants, so if you're interested, please see Quinn Maroney. She actually has the technology here to show you, and she's in the exhibit hall as well, and I'll be telling you about that and reminding you about that throughout the day too. Okay, for CEU certificates, I know we went to this new online registration system where you could actually pay using credit card, which I think worked really well for many of you. Remember in the past we were just accepting checks. We can now accept both credit card and check. Are people here still wanting to purchase CEUs today? Okay, if you still want to and you want to pay by credit card, if you haven't paid yet, you want to pay by credit card, please see Taylor. He's sitting at the big circular desk up front there. He's going to be here till around 10:30 if you want to pay by credit card. If you wish to pay by check, you can pay anytime during the day to me vis-a-vis check. Just make the check out for $50 to the University of Minnesota School of Nursing. Okay, and then of course at the end of the day, we will be handing out your CEU certificates. So you'll be able to see us up at the registration desk at around 4:15, 4:30 to pick up those certificates. And again, as I had mentioned before, please do complete the evaluation form if you can. If you're having a problem with temperature, let me know. We can try to adjust that for you. We had a really unfortunate incident last year. I probably shouldn't say this, but I think one of the vents, because it was at the time of the year where the vents hadn't been turned on, and I think one of them was like churning out black stuff. And this poor woman, I don't know if she's here. She probably isn't. I don't think she's going to come back. But this poor woman, she was wearing a really pretty like light yellow blouse and like these little black things. I mean, it was awful. So, I mean, what I asked the site to make sure to run the air conditioning a day before to get all that stuff out, and they did. So, so if that is happening to you, let me know so we can address it. So, okay. I am assuming you can all see me okay, and you can see the screen well. Those of you in the back, is the screen visible and easy to read? Okay, great. So I want to thank my conference committee, who has been such a huge help. You've met many of them here today already. I'm listing their names out. They've been a huge help to me because actually last year it was kind of a gap. Many of these staff persons I just hired in the fall, and they're all helping me out on the conference this year. And so they've been a huge help to me. And then many of the volunteers who are here today, they've been helping out with various aspects. I think the one area you see the most is where they're directing you in, which I think is a big help too. So again, I wanted to thank all of them and all the work they've been doing. Then finally, all of our sponsors for the conference here today, they're all located in the exhibit hall next to us here. Please do make sure to stop by and say hi. They have a lot of great information available. In particular, I want to thank Ebenezer. Ebenezer is kind of our premium sponsor. They pay for the box lunches, which is a huge expense. Well, I mean, it's a big expense, and it really helps us out a great deal. So a big thanks to Ebenezer, but thanks to all these other sponsors as well. They all make this conference possible in terms of being able to provide you with handouts, so many of the other things, speaker honoraria, the list goes on and on. And then finally, you'll also notice we have a number of other great exhibitors here today that also are here to provide you with great information, ranging from the various types of services and supports that the Alzheimer's Association and the Metropolitan Caregiver Service Collaborative provides, all the way to legal information. Mazer, Amundsen, Boggio, and Hendricks are here. Dr. Fong Yu has her studies out that she's still looking for participants. I mean, there's just a lot of great information and resources. We even have pet therapy here today. Did any of you see the dog here? Yeah, there's a dog in the exhibit hall, so I mean, definitely check that out too. So, yep, that's Valerie Richards, so we're very excited about that. So we've been talking about this, we still do accept donations. Again, we've set it up now where you can do it online, and I provided the link with you here. And we'll put that link up around in case any of you do have smartphones and are interested in donating. I mean, of course you're not, and I don't want to feel like I'm soliciting you. I guess I am, but so if you do have a check and you're willing, any amount is very much appreciated. Please just make it out to the University of Minnesota Foundation, and then on the 4-line put in the CPWML conference or something similar. Okay. The nice thing about the online donation too is it automatically generates a receipt for tax purposes. But if you pay by check, just remind me and we'll make sure to get you a receipt too. Did you all see the banner that we created too? It kind of thanks all of the individual donors out there. It's that big yellow banner. That was kind of the first thing we wanted to try this year. As always, Dr. Weckworth, I wanted to give special recognition to. He gave a very, very generous donation several years ago, and I just can't thank him enough. But beyond Dr. Weckworth is how many of you have donated in the past. And again, any amount is appreciated, and we're just hoping that we can keep adding to that banner over time. So again, we just thank all of you who have provided your support to the conference. Last thing is I want to thank you. Again, we can't do this conference without you from the community being here and driving the agenda and content. I mean, you're the ones who really emphasize why we need to keep doing this each year. And so I want to thank you so very much for being here yet again. So I really appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, so why don't we move to our first speaker? This is a speaker I have had the pleasure of co-presenting with many, many times. It's Dr. Judy Peters. She's a healthcare consultant. She has an incredible story to share, and what's so exciting about what Dr. Peters has done is she's taken this story and really has become a great innovator in providing person-centered care, in providing appropriate help to people with memory loss and their families. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Judy Peters. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I'd like to also put our hands together and thank Joe and his team for everything that they did to put this conference on. First, can everybody hear me okay? Okay. I want to thank you, each and every one of you, for getting up today and choosing to come to this conference on probably, the second best day that we've had this year. As I was looking at the weather, I was like, gosh, why couldn't it have been last weekend or the weekend before when we all sat through downpours of rain? I was also really glad to hear, and I have to admit, this is the first conference that I've been to, but I can see by the attendees and just the information that Joe has shared with me that it's a conference that I hope to attend again in the future as an attendee. And the other thing was I was really glad when I heard Joe give the kind of the origins of this conference, that it didn't have to be technical or too much evidence-based, that we could tell a story. And that's really where my, I would say that my agenda comes from. You'll see on my slides, I didn't put a disclosure, but if I had to put a disclosure in, it would be that I lean more towards the heart side than the science side. And that's because of my history in nursing. I've been a nurse for more than 35 years. I had the luxury of going to school at the University of Rhode Island, was where I got my undergrad. And if anybody knows anything about nursing, Sister Clister Roy was kind of the guiding factor in our curriculum. And she was very much person-centered. And I didn't know that that wasn't the way everybody was trained. I just thought everybody was trained in person-centered and relationship-based care. So, but I learned the hard way along the years that that's not really the way the health system was set up. It was very much set up based on disease and diagnosis and treatment, not on caring and healing. So a lot of what I'm going to present to you today came over from my origins and came from really my walk, both in healthcare and in a personal dimension. And the title I picked for today was Best Days Through Whole Person-Centered Caring, but let's talk. I can't emphasize that enough. It's any of these presentations, I hope you feel comfortable enough sharing your story and having a dialogue back and forth, because that's how we make a difference and that's how we change. And this shouldn't be a didactic, me just lecturing or anybody just lecturing. It's really a community event. So. Like any other presentation that you go to, there has to be objectives. But the one thing I want to point out is my objectives are all related to the trusted voice. And I'll build on that as we go through the morning. The trusted voice is sitting in every single seat here. And it's the people that you partner with in the care of either yourself or those that you love and those who you're walking the walk with. And as I share a lot of information with you this morning, and what I hope you walk away with is that never underestimate the power of your own voice in anything that you're doing in the healthcare system, okay? And don't ever acquiesce to what someone else is saying is the way to do it. Because, and we get bombarded on TV now too with the whole DNA, 23andMe, Ancestry.com. Well, take something from that. We're all different. So the way to care for people needs to be all different. And I know I make the health system crazy when I say that, individualized personal care plans. I mean it, and they should be used. Because if I have diabetes, my diabetes is different than someone else's diabetes because it's me. So aging well with our personal walk. We don't just get to 70, 80, 90 and not have a history that has come with us. Our history is all tied together. It's, and I use this analogy of threads of a different color because each decade of our life tends to have a different flavor as we age. However, they're all knotted together, and that's what we show up with whatever point in time that things start to change for us. We are an accumulation of yesterday, today, and kind of envisioning what tomorrow will bring. And so when we think about aging, even aside from memory loss, we have to think about it in the context of our whole life. Our legacy isn't just where we arrive with a disease or a diagnosis. Our legacy is everything that we bring to the table at that point in time. And so before I usually begin any kind of presentation, On this topic, I usually talk about what brings us to the conversation, what brings me to this conversation, what brings me to the table. Yes, I have a history in nursing, that's my career, but it's my mom and my father-in-law that brought me into this conversation. My father-in-law was diagnosed in early 2000s with Alzheimer's, and we had a 10-year period of time where we walked that walk with him. My mom had a little bit of a different story. As you can see, she's a fairly large woman. I can say this because she's my mom. I can also say she was a hot mess on paper. It's although that's not a medical term, but I'm sure that's what they. I walked a walk with her for my whole entire life. I'm an only child, and I always wanted to right my mother's wrongs. I'm sure none of you have ever had that experience. But my mother, why I say a hot mess, she had diabetes, she had heart failure, she was my height and she was 350 pounds. And that just didn't happen in one day. And she was what everybody in the healthcare system labels as non-compliant. Well, after decades of wrestling with my mom and trying to right her wrongs, I had the epiphany of saying, hey, if we dance together, maybe this little journey can be a little bit different. Unfortunately, I waited too long. I waited until probably the last 6 months of her life to get to that point. And it was the best 6 months ever. And I promised myself in 2010, after that experience, that I would take what I knew personally and professionally and merge those together. And if I ever had the opportunity to build person-centered relationship care in motion, whether it was with an organization or whether it was just one-on-one with other individuals, I would commit myself to that. So that's kind of what brings me to this walk today. A side note too, my mother would always say, what do you want from me, Judy? And I would say, I want this or I want that. And finally, when we changed that to, I don't know, Mom, what do you want? Boy, did I learn a whole bunch of stuff. And I learned that it's people, not patients. When we go to a doctor for whatever reason, they're looking to diagnose and treat. And I can't say enough about the medical community. They're wonderful. We want to partner with them, but we also want to partner with a lot of other trusted voices. We want to partner with taking a pause in our own life and saying, what do I know? What brings me to today? What am I looking for? And whether I'm talking with individuals or I'm talking with staff or we're building something, I always say to people, take a pause. And that actually was taught to me, 40 years ago when I first entered nursing school, as a way to try to figure out what was going on, kind of scan the room. Just because someone is there because they've had a heart attack doesn't mean that they are the heart attack. That person is actually, the focal thing is the heart attack, especially to the medical community. But contextually around that person, they're wondering if they're going to get to their kid's high school graduation, or they're wondering if they're going to pay the mortgage next month. Those are the things that taking a pause help you to do. And it's really about checking your head and your heart. So when we think about person-centered care, it's forming that relationship. It's like, what do I know? Professionally, I'm taught a certain way, so that's my head. I can think evidence-based and I can think technical when I'm forced to do that. But really, what does my heart say right now? And how can I blend those two together? Obviously, if someone collapses in front of me or they're hemorrhaging, you gotta use your head and go through the litany of what you're supposed to do. But if someone is telling you about what's bothering them, you listen to them. Is that something major that we should pay attention to? Oh, gosh. Let's hope that gets fixed, right? So in checking your head and your heart, it will always lead you in your gut to do the right thing. Now, the right thing isn't always the easiest thing. It's not always the thing that you want to do, but it's the right thing for that particular person. So it's a mantra that I try to engage teams when we get together. It's nothing scientific. It's nothing huge and profound. It's very basic. It's take a pause, check your gut. That's your head and your heart. Comes together to tell you to do the right thing. And so before we get into some of the other things that I want to talk about expectation a little bit. And for those of you who are or have walked with someone who has memory loss, you might have read some of Pauline Boss's stuff on ambiguous loss. Anybody familiar with Pauline Boss's? She's been writing on ambiguous loss for a long time. And ambiguous loss is when you come to, when something happens unexpectedly. It can be a plane crash. Someone goes missing. Like this Amber Alert. I couldn't have timed it, I guess, any better, but unfortunately, it's when something like that happens, it's brought into your plan, and it's disruptive to your plan. And how do you give time and space to grieve that change? And it's really important to do that process because it helps with how you move forward. And another example of this is, we all have an image of how we're going to age, and we have an image of how we think our parents are going to age. I did imagine that once I was done raising my kids and they were off to college, I was going to have all this wonderful time with my mom to go shopping or to do the things that she wanted to do. And I had to learn how to weave some of that in, and in a way, I had this huge thing in my head that was going to be perfect. And I started focusing on what was going wrong with her health. It was the same thing with my father-in-law. What was going wrong with his, well, I kept saying wrong, 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 wrong. It was all this negative. And what I ended up missing was what the beauty of the garden that was before me. And why I've used the analogy here of Italy and Holland is some of you, if you haven't read Pauline Boss's stuff, you might have read My Trip to Holland or Welcome to Holland. It's a woman, Emily, and I can't think of her last name right now, but she wrote a book about having a child with a disability, having a child who was born, I think, with Down syndrome. And when you're preparing to have a child, just like you're preparing to age, you envision, or it's like planning for a vacation. The whole time she was planning this gorgeous vacation going to Italy. And instead, she arrived in Holland. So it's not like she still didn't have a child. She just had a child that was different. And the analogy there is that when we focus on the negative all the time, we really miss the gifts that are also presenting to us. And we're still experiencing an aging process. But if we only look to what is bad about that aging process, we forget about some of the gifts that have arrived on the doorstep at the same time. So people can still live life well and live the person life, even though the dementia is there. It never goes away. And hopefully in all of our lifetimes we do see a cure. And that's where our science is so valuable. Research is so valuable. But so is the person who's here in front of us today. And being person-centered and relationship-based is about the gift of the whole story. And that's where I'm going to take you into. It's ways of being, ways of knowing, and ways of doing. And what does that actually look like? And I'm going to show you a little model here, but it really begins with the strength of the story in creating that individualized care plan. And I had the opportunity to work with the Waters Senior Living, and I think they're here, when they first opened. And any of you who have sought out either assisted living or home care, you know the whole thing always begins with an assessment. And I've always been opposed to the word assessment because it's like testing. Who likes to take a test? Because already it's like you're going to either pass or fail this, right? And if someone is struggling, whether it is heart failure, diabetes, or it is memory loss, the last thing anybody wants to do is to be tested again. So one of the things that I developed and supported, and I continue to do this in other avenues, is to talk about the strength of someone's story. So a good clinician should be able to take an assessment by just having a conversation. Tell me about what brings you joy. And before you know it, someone's telling you about the 3 kids they have. So now you know they've got family members. So tell me about those folks. Tell me about experiences where you've done X, Y, or Z, and soon before you know it, you're either getting this information from the individual or you're getting it from their caregivers around them. But it's not so much about what they can't do, it's more about what they can do. And those are the blessings, because every good individualized care plan should be built around what someone can do. And it's working with the ability versus the disability. And I can't emphasize that enough. And it's also something that's fluid and agile. So when you have a relationship, and here I've pointed out primary nurse relationship, but I can use nurse in a very broad sense. It can be your caregiver, it can be the neighbor, it can be the social worker. Depending on what your environment is, you have to have a primary relation with someone who's really partnering with you, the trusted voice in your plan of care. If you are able, you are still that main trusted voice always, because what comes from you is the truth. We know it. Any of us who have worked with someone who has memory loss, their lens is the right lens. And the sooner we recognize that, the better it is for everyone. And if it's not causing a fire or a major malfunction, then agree to it, let it go, and move on. It's the yes and we'll talk a little bit more about that. It's also words matter, and I'm going to talk about when you're looking for places, if you've decided that a community living space is the right place to go, I'm going to talk about what that looks like and why words matter. Words matter not only in one-on-one relationships, but what does a facility have for job descriptions, and I'll talk more about that. But here would be the model that I would say that is around the person. I'm going to start with I've talked a little bit about the partnerships and trusted voices. It's you, it's the family, it's the neighborhood, it's doctors, it's whoever is in your community of caregiving. Those are all trusted voices. The humanness and authenticity, it's recognizing that everybody's human in that partnership. Not only you and the person that you're advocating for, but also the providers too. And it's recognizing that people are people, and people do make mistakes, but what you want to know is when people say, you're sorry, here's how we're going to correct it, and here's how we're going to move on. Because we're never going to make true change in care and caregiving if we don't partner and work through relationships. So person-centered, relationship-based care sounds wonderful, but relationships are like families too. Families are not, here's where we start, and here's the sunshine, and everything in between is the flat line. That's beautiful with the stars shining in the sky and all that kind of stuff, right? Families have huge peaks and valleys, right? Sometimes there's mountains and there's the water in between, and we have to figure out the rope that we're going to walk to get across. Well, caregiving is that same way. And if you have good partnerships with your trusted voice circle, you're going to have some times where you're throwing the fishing line over to the other mountain and you're just going to go on a prayer for this point in time. But because you've developed the foundation of the good partnership, it works better. Okay? So what I would say is that recognizing not only your own humanness, but it's also the humanness of the people that you have brought into that circle of trust. The other one is functional living. And this goes back to expectations. I had all these expectations of what I wanted my mother to do. And darn it, I wanted her to walk around Walmart. But no, she wanted to ride that scooter. And I was like, And towards the end of her life, when scooter riding, because everything in my healthcare head told me you can't let her on a scooter because she doesn't have the mental and the functional capacity to be on a scooter. I'm like, damn it, I'm going to let her on a scooter. What's the worst thing that's going to happen for me right now in Walmart? She's going to embarrass the hell out of me. It's going to be one. The second thing is that she's going to knock over some stuff, right? And as long as I'm with her and we were not in the glassware aisle, I'm going to let it go. And boy, It's easy for me to stand up here right now and tell you this, but I can tell you the day that I decided to let her on that scooter, she never rode a scooter after that, but that day, she wanted to be on a scooter. And that day, she embarrassed the hell out of me. But you know what? I have that memory. And she was happy at the end of that day. There wasn't anything else that anybody could do for her that could make her happy, but I took her to Walmart and let her ride that scooter. So I can never go back to the Walmart in Eden Prairie, by the way. So, but you know, sometimes you just have to do those things because that's your own voice listening to, okay, you know what, this is what I need to do right now for her own functional living. And it's humanness, and so be it. Environment, technology, and culture. I have that up there too because a lot is changing technology-wise, and we'll talk a little bit about that in the future, and I know most of you know a lot of the work that Joe is working on. But environments, it's important to look at environments and recognize that the environment today might not be the best environment tomorrow. And I'll talk a little bit more about this in a few minutes, but you know, we are a society that we haven't begun to understand aging in a place and you never move because we just assume that once you get to the place that you're going to age in, you're going to stay there. Well, heck no. As baby boomers, we move around, and what's to say we wouldn't move as we age, even as we age with memory loss, and I'll talk more about that a little bit later. But so that's basically a model that I tend to work with a lot of folks with, is looking at the person, not just as the disease and the diagnosis, but what is the environment, what's the physical, what's the social, what's the community, and it's just like anything else. Hopefully that Amber Alert is saying they found this person and it's over. It's just like anything else. Sometimes the physical part of the person has to be first and foremost. But a lot of times it's more the social, or it's the environmental, or it's the community. And be agile and fluid enough in that individualized care plan that you can move whatever it is that's the priority and not just stay focused in one place. Whoops. How do you see me and how do I see me? I'm going to try something here to see if I can get a little video. Joe, can I get that? Let me see. I just want to show you this little video because this is really cute. Restart required. Oh, can I not? Where's my technical people? Okay, let me see. There's always, what is it, 2 ways to skin a cat? Let's see if I can get it. I'm probably gonna like contaminate everybody's. Oh my gosh, how's that? Are you gonna help me?
Is there audio to you?
Yes, yeah, I'm sorry. Okay. Go back to. Go to YouTube. You know, it's funny because if you do any kind of stress management work, they'll say, years ago it used to be that public speaking, you know, with the little overheads, was like the most, if I stand on my tiptoes I can see, used to be the most stressful for individuals, but then it became public speaking and presentations with technology. And clearly now it's checking out that technology before you actually start. So, This how do you see me? Oh, there we go. Maybe it will work now. Ah.
Here come the hot stepper. I'm the lyrical gangster. Pick up the crew in the area. Still love you like that. No, we don't die. Yes, we multiply. Anyone press me? I got you know we grow.
See, I think we all needed that, didn't we? All right. So clearly, I didn't show you this video because of the water commercial. I showed it, and I show this to teams I work with, just to how do you see me and how do I see me? And think about that in terms of whoever we're working with and for. We all look in the mirror and we see something every day. Men tend to see themselves a lot thinner and taller, and women, we see ourselves shorter and a little bit bigger, right? But we bring those lenses into all of our day-to-day. So be cognizant of how you're seeing the person and how the person sees themselves. And the value of how the person sees themselves is what's really important to that individualized care plan. And what do you see? And if we think about people who are challenged by memory loss, and I put this up there, many times this is how they're trying to explain their day. And sometimes this is how I'm trying to explain my day, and all of us here. And think about it. Any one of us right now, do we know which direction to go? No. And I talk about this in terms of the context. Nothing is more nerve-wracking to me when I walk into a facility, a community, whatever, and people will say, she doesn't know where her apartment is anymore. She no longer does such and such. And quite in honesty, the first time I moved into a condo after living in a home for 26 years, I went into the wrong apartment. I got off on the 6th floor, which looks just like the 8th floor. And I walked to where I thought my apartment was because I wasn't totally paying attention. Colors were the same. And I opened the apartment door because I knew my husband was going to be home. And there sitting on my couch was a woman drinking wine. And I immediately realized, oh my God, I'm in the wrong apartment, right? And when I stepped back out, I was on the 6th floor. And what did I do? Shamefully, I ran to the elevator because I was going to get out of there before someone said something. I went back, I apologized, and they wanted me to come in, and I'm like, no, pretend you never saw me. But we need to think about that. Did everybody rush me off and do this whole assessment on me right then and there, or say that I had to move someplace else? No, you have to remember the context. And, I talk to staff and teams a lot about, have you told that caregiver anything good in the last 10 times you've been with that caregiver? What are the positives? Tell me 3 positives you've said about this particular individual. And if they have to pause about that, something's not right there. Because this is where the disconnect happens with those trusted voices. If the trusted voice is only coming and saying negative, negative, negative all the time, oh, you got to do this, you got to do that. It's like, whoa, no. This is a partnership. We got to back up. Think about how the person is seeing this. And if you yourself can navigate through that, boy, you've got some stuff that we need to get and we need to pass on to other people. Because lots of people every day, if the context is not considered, they can't figure out how to get from point A to point B. And how can you make that easier for them? So before I mentioned words matter. So if you're looking to hire somebody to help you out, or you're looking to, your loved one is in a facility or community, ask about, if they tell you what their philosophy is and how they operate, and ask them, do their job descriptions reflect that? Because you can't hold people accountable for work on person-centered relationship-based care or inclusiveness or anything like that unless it's reflected in job descriptions. Because that's where people go back to. Everybody knows good clinical care, right? Everybody knows how to give a bath. That's not clinical care, but everybody knows how to do that, right? But are you doing that with the integrity of the individual driving that experience? Or are you doing it as a service task just to get it done? And ask those questions, because those are really important questions. And I thoroughly believe that everybody who truly goes into a helping profession, whether you're a PCA, whether you're a home health aide, a nurse, anybody, doctor, you really have good heart and good center. It's systems sometimes that get put in place, and that's where our policies and our laws, our regulations get made, that challenge that goodness that people bring to the table. So looking at those things and asking, how is this reflected in your policies and procedures? Do your policies and procedures even talk about what you're saying is central to how you honor someone's integrity in your space? And that begins to, really bring clarity into this relationship that you're going to have with, whether it's someone that you're hiring to come into your home, or whether your particular family member is going into a community to live. And so this yes and concept too, I like to talk about, and a lot of you have heard this before, but when we're asking what do people see and validating what people see, probably this bottom one right away, if the two faces together probably jumped out at people. But if you look really close, and it's hard to see on the screen, but there's some individuals like right here that are playing guitar. Yeah. And if you look at the top, the first things that come to mind is I think a man on a horse, and there's a stream, right, and some rocks. But again, if you look really close, you start to see a face here and over there. And I throw this out there for us when we're talking about what do you see, and the importance of validating whatever the person tells you. Because maybe you don't know, but there are people playing guitar, even though in your role, whether you're spouse, friend, aunt, nurse, you just can't see that. So that's where, when we get into individualized care planning in a person-centered relationship-based approach, the individual that is the plan for is the most important person in the plan. And I love this. And that context, I'm not going to go to the context because I'm not going to throw us off again, but I absolutely love this. So, when you see me dancing in the hallways, if you don't want me to dance, why is there music, right? And I got to tell you another little funny story, so full disclosure about context. So, and I know the gentleman is probably here someplace, and when I first got here, I went to the bathroom, but I went into the men's room, okay? I stopped myself right before. Now, again, when you walk into that bathroom area, you see restroom, okay? Anybody else hesitate before they would? Thank you. And this gentleman was right behind me, and he goes, "Oh, don't go in there." And I was like, okay, but I recognized I shouldn't go in there. But again, the context of a situation, we as caregivers we need to stop ourselves before we go to, but that's not right, or stop, or don't. Think about what is also happening, scan the place to see, is there something that could actually be setting that person up to be doing that particular thing. Okay. So these are the golden rules, which you've probably been exposed to before, either from the Alzheimer's Association or other organizations. Using the person's preferred name when a care plan is set. Those are the kinds of things you want to make sure that you're having dialogue with whoever is caring for your family member when you're not around. The other thing, too, is sometimes voices. I think about back, I did school nursing for a number of years, and that part of that process is an individualized educational and health plan. And I would get into, you sit with a family member, you sit with a child, and I had this thing like, let's talk. And this little boy used to say to me, Mrs. Peters, all you want to do is talk. You just want to talk all the time. Your voice is annoying. And I said, you're right. My voice is annoying. And of course, I went home that night and I said to my kids, which was the wrong thing to say, do you think my voice is annoying? And my husband was laughing, and the kids are like, no, Mom, it's not annoying. So anyway, but, watch our voices too. Slowness. I'm from the East Coast originally, so I tend to talk a little bit faster. I drop off the R's, I add them in where they shouldn't be. But everyone here in Minnesota says they're going to go with. When I first came here, I wasn't really sure what that meant. I'm going to go with what? With a car? And so be contextual, understand the culture, and watch the voice. Repeating words, don't quiz. And I have done this, and it's got nothing to do with someone who has memory loss, but when I meet people, I'll say, it's so nice to see you. Right? Denise, didn't I do that to you? Well, it's giving me time to think of where I know Denise from. We don't want to quiz someone about our name. Don't you remember me? What's my name? Family members, we have a tendency to want to do that because we get all like, oh, they can't remember me and they don't know my name anymore. But rather than that, it's so nice to see you, Denise. It's been a long time. Judy Peters, we met at blah, blah, blah. And that way, even though I might have seen Denise earlier today, so I'm not picking on you or anything, I might have seen her this morning, it allows Denise to get to that comfort level where I'm not putting her on the spot anymore. And those are the little techniques that are so helpful and can de-escalate something that can easily get way out of control. And watch your body language too when you are doing any kind of technique. Because words matter, but what the face is saying and what the body's doing, you want to kind of bring those things into focus. Because we've all been there with a teenager who is saying, well, I don't know, I'm going to do it, Mom. And you know right well that they're like not going to do it just by the way the tension is in that experience. So words do matter. And when something works, when you're developing an individualized care plan and something works, share it. Everybody likes to be loved and everybody wants to be needed, especially when you get into community living. If someone is in a memory care, assisted living, wherever they are, I can't emphasize this enough. It's like you share the recipe and you share it down to the nitty gritty. You don't leave out an ingredient, because if you leave out an ingredient, it's not going to taste the same. And that works with an individualized care plan. It only works if someone really needs that shampoo on the counter sink and not in the shower, because it'll mess up their day, and you figure that out. Share it with whoever's coming behind you. And it might sound like nothing to you, and in the busyness of our work, sometimes we forget those little things, but it is so important. Here's a few more action strategies. Accept the state of the person's cognitive ability and work within their limitation. That's validation therapy. And are people familiar with validation therapy? Because I want to go into it. All right. So validation therapy is that yes and. It's meeting them where they're at. Denise, can I pick on you again? she stole my watch. And so a caregiver comes over, and your tendency is like, oh, Denise is a nice person. Denise would never steal anybody's watch, right? Yes, she did. Me, I'm going to get more and more escalated, right? As a caregiver coming over, you repeat what the person says. She stole your watch? Because now what that caregiver does is it meets me, right, where I didn't say, yes, Denise stole your watch, she's a horrible person. But what I said is, she stole your watch? So now we're going to focus on stealing the watch, not on Denise. We're going to take it away from Denise. But we're validated what the person is feeling. And if you haven't looked at anything on validation therapy, I'd highly recommend it. It's that not righting a wrong, not correcting. You know, years ago, especially nurses, those of you who are nurses here, person, place, time, we had to make sure everybody knew what person, place, time is and where they're at. Well, clearly, if I'm going into the wrong apartment and I know where I'm at, okay? It's just that something else has distracted me. We don't do that anymore. We don't have to right or wrong. And unless I'm walking into a fire, right? Unless something is going to be harmful and damaging, what's the big deal? They're right, you're wrong. That's validation therapy. Also a reflection to understand what's being said. All symptoms have meaning. And I use the word symptoms instead of behaviors. Behaviors are like nails on a chalkboard for me. And there's a big push right now too, even in behavioral therapy, because psychiatry, nobody liked to hear psychiatry because that meant you had something wrong with your head or whatever. So then the industry switched to behavioral health. And then we started hearing people say, well, I don't have anything wrong with my behavior. I got a mental health issue, okay? So I tend to use the word symptoms. So if my symptom is right now, I'm angry at Denise for accusing her, I'm stealing my watch. I'm trying to tell somebody something. And your job as the caregiver is to figure out what I'm trying to tell you. And if we try to say, no, Denise didn't steal your watch, it means that I'm not validating what you're saying, and I'm not recognizing that you're trying to tell me something else. And here's a big one for me. I call it the reality show discussion. Expectations at the beginning when I was talking about how we expect to age a certain way and we expect to go to Italy on our vacation versus going to Holland. The reality is the individual who has the memory loss. It's their reality. It's not yours. Expectations tend to be what we expect. They're in a place where it's their reality right now in time. And that's where you have to meet them. And you have to give yourself that grieving time, like Pauline Boss writes about, the ambiguous loss, the recognizing what is not meeting your expectation, but realizing that you can meet their expectations. Because at certain points in time, they're just simple being present to their space is all that they really need. Now, granted, you more than likely need something else from them that you're still having to walk through that grieving process. And that's a whole another conference that we could have just on that. So, and understanding the current state of the person's physical limitations. I'm not here to promote community living or memory care centers or not memory care centers, living at home or not living at home, but I want to talk a little bit about community living because that tends to be what people decide to do at a point in time. I just want to make sure I've got time here. The important thing is to continually go back to your individualized care plan and recognize what your ability is and what the individual's ability is, okay? And being comfortable with and okay with changing that over time. If someone if someone decides that, or they made a commitment that mom, dad, sister, brother are gonna stay at home, you have to also talk about what is the home gonna look like for that individual? What are the trusted partners that are going to be together to care for that individual over time as physical conditions change. It's not a bad thing, it's not a good thing. It's whatever you want to do and your partners want to do. So, but I want to talk a little bit about if you do choose a community dwelling space, the partnership truly is the number one thing. Can't emphasize that enough. It offers you the 24/7 caregiver on site. Again, you could choose to have a 24/7 caregiver in your home or in the individual's home too. Years ago, we used to say someone gets to a certain point in their memory loss, boom, they have to go into memory care. It has to be a locked, secured facility. And I know I would have probably people here too, that would say, well, we still have to do that. I guess what I'm here to talk about is just to challenge that thinking a little bit and to say, are there other ways that people can be cared for within the home? And that will only work based on partnerships and what that could look like when you set up your plan. Okay. And I wanted to share this with you because this is something that if you are deciding to go into communal living, or if you're deciding to work with your loved one at home, how do you operationalize this? What does this look like every day? And you can see the foundation of this model is really communication, communication, communication. Even though you'll have this individualized care plan, we're all human beings, right? And every day is different. I might have liked salmon my entire life, but all of a sudden today, it is like the worst thing I've ever seen. And if I cooked salmon, and I'm leaving at 5 o'clock, and the person who you're caring for started to say, I don't like salmon today, and you say, well, you've always liked salmon, and I don't like salmon today. You got to let that person know who's coming in at 5:05, they don't like salmon today. Because if you try to give them salmon, it's going to not be a good day. So those are the kinds of things that you need to have round-the-clock communication. I can't emphasize enough is meeting a person where they're at today, every day. Because every day can be a new day, it can be a different day. Yeah, there can be like 6 days that are exactly the same sometimes, if you're lucky or not lucky. I don't know, it depends on what your own personal lens is of every day being the same day. But most times you'll have a much better experience if you can recognize that every day is truly a new day. And in all kinds of caregiving, that gift of every day being a new day does help you for that day that you're confronting. I wanted to share this with you too because I found it very interesting when I first started getting into looking at, because when you work in any kind of health system, they always want to know how much time is something going to take. I need to know how much time is a bath, how much time is eating, blah, blah, blah. And for my head, I'm like, what difference does it make? Because some days it's going to take 3 hours and some days it's going to take 30 minutes because that's what individualized care is. And so and this is no offense for any like bean counters in the audience, but this has been researched and studied. It's put out by the Alzheimer's Association. And it's really interesting that if someone has a physical limitation and you're thinking about ADLs, so that's bathing, dressing, eating, it's about a little shy of an hour, 55 minutes. If they have a cognitive impairment, that's a little over an hour and a half. Combine those two things, a cognitive impairment and a physical impairment, you're talking about 2.5 hours. That's just if everything goes well. So I'm going to pause for a little bit there and think about this, in how we get frustrated sometimes with ourselves because yesterday, eating went fine. Like today, it took an hour and a half. Why is that? Well, it's because today you're forgetting that maybe the bathing went fine or you didn't bathe today. And there's really no logical explanation sometimes why things go better one day or the next. But give yourself credit for knowing that just this series, and how many times a day do you do this same series again and again with somebody? Most people eat at least 3 or 6 times a day, right? Depending on how they're structured. So it takes a lot of time. And there are And I know later on this afternoon you're going to have about talks about fun in caregiving, and using music and using therapeutic touch and thinking about spirituality. All of that can help as you navigate those activities of daily living. And yes, it might still take 2 hours to do something, but it's going to be such a more comforting experience for you and the person that you're caring for if you bring some of those modalities into your everyday life. And reminiscing is a huge therapeutic opportunity. Meeting them where they're at, even though a lot of times we're trying to talk about today and yesterday, but they want to talk about how they raised their 4 children and how busy they were, and talk about that. Talk about that in terms of, bathing the children, and now we're bathing, and boy, was it like this, I bet you did this every day, and compliment them on how good they did their bathing. And before you know it, the bathing is done. Think about opportunities that you can bring in, things that they're successful at, and that will also help some of these benchmarks. And Rachel Naomi Remen, she's written those kitchen table gospel books. This is one of my favorite quotes from one of her books. It's perhaps our best work as health professionals and also as caregivers, and we don't give enough credit to this particular entity. So our best work is not about something we do, but it's about something we are and something we become, and we bring into all of our relationships. So in our world, our health system world, certainly in communities, facilities, hospitals, home care, we're doing. Because the doing equals how do you bill and how does insurance reimburse, right? But the real caring and curing and healing just comes from presence. It comes from being there. It's, and boy, I wish we could put a code on that, because if we could put a code on that and we could bill it to our insurance companies, boy, I'd be rich. And the world would be so much better. But I don't want to close the door on that, because I think that we're going to get there eventually. Because, there's a lot of shakeup going on in healthcare and in funding and what's working and what's not working. And how do we have conversations, both politically and in bringing it into what will really give most value, most quality of life across the board. And in going back to my mother's story, she had like 16 medications she took every day, and then they were the rescue stuff and all that kind of stuff. And I'd find them on the floor, I'd find them all over the place. And, you traipse into the doctor, and are you taking your meds? Oh, yeah. All she wanted to talk about was the doctor had just had a baby. She wanted to talk about her grandchildren. Those were the things that made her well. And that is just as valuable as taking that medication every day. And sometimes it gets to the point that you have to have these tough conversations. Do I need to continue doing all of this to get to the quality of life that I want? And those are hard conversations to have, but important ones to have. So that, I actually just told you a little bit about this one. So it's actually before the crisis. I wanted to also share with you a little bit about the tough conversation is where I got to, and it's usually the elephant in the room, that if any of you are here right now and are not as someone who is in the health system, or you're not in the health system and you don't have someone with memory loss or in the early stages, it's really having some heart-to-heart conversations. What do you want this aging process to look like? And I found this quote, which was pretty interesting, that according to a survey of people aged 45 years and older, most Americans are more willing to discuss sex and drugs with their teenagers than have hard conversations about aging. So I know we're at a conference about caring for people with memory loss. So you're already maybe a little bit past this, but I like to throw this out there because I can't encourage you enough that if you have an opportunity with other family members that don't have memory loss, have that conversation about what do you want this to look like. Then after you have that conversation and you've recorded it, honor it. And remember, it's their lived experience and their individualized plan forward. It's not your expectation. And that's hard, especially as adult children. And that's why we don't want to wait till the crisis happens to be moving all the pieces and trying to figure something out. The better gift, the bigger gift is to back up and say, what do we want this to look like? And it's really hard when the crisis happens because your own emotional gut as the adult child, as a spouse, comes in. So having that conversation and then honoring it. And trusted voice, this quote by William Faulkner, we have to start teaching ourselves not to be afraid. A couple of years ago, I think actually I was with Joe giving a presentation similar, and then we did Q&A, and I think it was like an eye-opener for me too. This gentleman said, thank you for all the talk today. He said, it was easier for me to talk about when I had depression and mental illness than it has been for me to talk about my wife's Alzheimer's. And I thought, wow. And then came the conversation off of that. It's like we talk about cardiovascular disease. You know, we get it out there. We talk about what we're going to do for it. But we don't have enough conversations about having memory loss, caring for people with memory loss. We've gotten way better in the last 5 years. But we have to, again, go back to our own gut, which is where our trusted voice comes from. And if something doesn't feel right, then it's not right. I mean, we learned that, right, in kindergarten. And be okay with bringing that forward. And this is where I usually like to talk about, to just challenge our thinking a little bit. So my mother made me promise I was never going to put her in a nursing home. How many people have heard that? Promise don't put me in a nursing home. Because eventually, I mean, she had in her head what the nursing homes were in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, right, that she had gone to visit family members in. And I'm hoping that doesn't exist anywhere anymore. But the bigger conversation is how do you want to be cared for? What do you want this to look like, Mom? And in working through that, she did not want to go. She wanted to stay in the apartment that she was in. So then came, how do we pull together to figure out how to keep her where she needs to be? And being good stewards of her money. And those are the tough conversations. So then we can sidestep to looking at what you know about the person and looking at if they are going to move to a community. So if someone is very introverted, and even at the time of their memory loss, they're a very introverted person, and you look at communities that have all this motion going on, that could cause big challenges for that very introverted person. It doesn't mean it's a bad community, and it doesn't mean that it's not right for someone else. It just means that it's not right for your particular person. So we have to be comfortable with saying, gosh, you know, Mom, Dad, whatever, moved here, and now I realize this, and this isn't good. We don't have to be negative on the community. We just have to, and this is also for the community. Those of you who run communities also have the mindset that no one can ever move, right? We have to get a little more comfortable with, hey, this isn't right for us right now, and we've decided we're moving to another place. That's a different mindset than has existed traditionally out there. Because we look at aging as you get to this point in time, and you move to one place, and you stay at that place. When I first proposed this, it was a group of executives, and I asked, because of course every owner of any kind of community wants everybody to stay in their community, right? But I asked, so tell me about how long you've lived in your current house. And depending on where people are in their life cycle, they might have lived in that house 20 years, right? 30 years. And then I said, well, before that, where did you live? Well, after I graduated from college, I had my first apartment, and then I lived with some guides, and I lived here. So oh, so you've lived in 6 or 7 different places. And are you going to stay in your house forever? No, my wife and I, we've also bought a condo because we're going to, it's like, okay, are you going to live in that condo forever? And no, then we might, I said, see that thinking? We haven't quite got there in the aging space yet, but I am predicting, so all of you can write this down when I come back in 10 years, that we're going to see people become more comfortable with moving and it not having to be a negative thing. Right now we have it as a negative thing. So think about that. I wanted to throw some of this literature out there. If you haven't read Being Mortal, which is Atul Gawande's book, have people read Atul Gawande's book? Yeah, it is an absolutely wonderful write. He is a surgeon, and he had an experience with his own mom and dad, and traveled with a hospice nurse for a while. But what he challenges us to think about is the chasm or the gap that exists between aging well, aging with some limitations, and adult children or caregivers caring for those individuals or partnering with them. There's this gap in the middle, and the gap is about risk and choice. And when you ask seniors or people who are getting into their 60s and 70s, this is even, before any kind of cognitive limitation comes, or even if cognitive limitation isn't in their path. But if you ask them, what do they want? Most will say, I want to be autonomous. I want to be safe, sort of, my own way. I want to be happy. Mostly, I want to be autonomous and I want to be happy. The adult children want their parents to be safe. They want them not to fall. So then you say to the aging person, do you want to fall? Well, hell no, I don't want to fall. But I'd rather fall than someone just keeping me in a bubble. And that's really uncomfortable for us who are caregivers. It's uncomfortable for us who are the adult children. It's like, oh my God, because if they fall, they're going to break a hip, and then we got to do this, we got to do that. When if you ask the person who's fallen, they're like, so what? I got this, I got that, I'll deal with it. But I'm kind of like my mother on the scooter, okay? She was willing to take the risk, and I had to be willing to meet her with the risk. So it really challenges our whole thinking about risk and choice. And also with the autonomous and the happy that they'll usually say is if someone is living independently and then the cognition, the memory impairment continues to decline, and it gets to the point that they do need to go into a memory care community, that those conversations get a little bit harder sometimes with siblings in having that discussion. But there's a way to help that individual who's walking that walk with memory care to be more autonomous when they are in a community that is totally dedicated just to memory loss. Because everyone there has the same type of understanding versus the community at large that hasn't quite got there yet. And one of the dreams I have is, another thing you can Google is Dementia Village. It's a place in, I think, Denmark, right? Is it Denmark? Where is it? Could be Holland. What it is that they tried this project where they took a whole, 2 blocks of a community and created everything that was dementia focused. It was just so ideal. So the grocery store, the library, the community can just freely move. There's no money exchange. It's things that start to create challenges for folks who have memory loss as a functionality. So, but you still know how to go to the grocery store, right? You get your cart because you put things in the cart, you go up to the checkout, you put things on the checkout. The register person does the little register stuff, puts things in the bag and says thank you and have a nice day, and you take your stuff and you go to the car. So it's a community that starts to eliminate the challenges. It's usually those processing challenges that start happening for folks. So that would be the ideal at some point in time. The other book that I want to point out to you is On the Sunny Side of the Street. This is an individual who actually walked the walk of Alzheimer's with her mom. And when she wrote this book, she wrote it after she lost her mom and wrote it from a very positive perspective and added humor into it. And because a lot of the things that she had been reading up to that point in time centered more on all of the negative. And it's not all negative. And I think that's what, in her voice, she wanted to get across to the world. So sharing your trusted voice. Things to remember, when you look at a person, any person, remember that everybody has a story and everyone has gone through something that has changed them. And so even though we're trying to find the fix that makes the day work, know that the story that brought us here wasn't a straight line story. It was a up and down kind of convoluted story. So going forward, you're still going to have the up and downs and the convoluted, but that's what makes everyone human and authentic. And the one last technique that I want to make sure that you walk away with, and is really central to person-centered relationship-based care, it's about listening. And it's about listening to hear and understand. Listening to hear and understand. It's not about listening to reply. And in our busy, harried lives, a lot of us, someone asks a question, so I'm going to think, okay, what am I going to say, right? No, this is about being present in the time and space with the individual and hearing what they're saying so that, well, you've listened, and when you do respond, you're responding from where you're meeting them at. You're validating what they just said, and if you need to pivot it to a safe place, you pivot it to a safe place. But you don't do the yes, but, or no. That's the worst thing that that's the worst thing that we can hear. Do you like to hear, no, do this? No, nobody likes to hear that. The other thing, if you think about, this is human nature too. Someone tells you 5 things that you've done perfectly today. And then they say, but I really didn't like the blouse that you chose to wear today. God, that makes you feel like crap, right? Because you start thinking, what was wrong with the blouse? Was there something that didn't work with the blouse? You forget about how all these other things were like wonderful and they were applauding you for. You focus on, darn, I picked the wrong blouse out of the closet today. And that's what everybody was looking at. So if I have memory loss and I'm working with that, if you are trying to always correct me and right me, I'm feeling unvalued and I'm not feeling part of what's going on. So really, authentic humanness, which is central to person-centered relationship-based care, is really about listening with your heart and responding from that point of view. And I think that should wrap me up. Am I close to the time? Did I go over? Okay. I want to take questions. Anybody have any questions? Just don't comment on what I'm wearing, because I did...
Someone, go ahead and raise your hand. We have mics coming around the audience for you to ask a question. Sierra, over here.
Can you address, so many of us are coming at it, like you have many years of experience, I have many years of experience, and so much of what we see becomes normal for us, but it's brand new to each family that comes our way and needs help in caring for their loved one. Can you address the issue of how, I know one of the last things you said is you listen to understand, not to respond. But just they're going through so much turmoil maybe, or they just are very confused, or that you see them doing so many things wrong. But because of your experience, and I mean wrong as in they're trying to correct their loved one, or they're, can you address how a professional can just gently guide them or be there for that family? While also letting that family walk through this journey with their loved ones, so it's still their story.
Thank you for the question. I think first and foremost, it's to use the experience that you have and take the pause and recognize exactly like how you started off by saying families, if they're new to the experience, are being faced with a lot of challenges. And it's just, and I always hesitate, I never like to compare this to like when you're raising a child. And your parenting is you're correcting and writing all the time. And sometimes you have to do that. None of us were perfect parents. Well, maybe there's some people in here who are perfect parents. My mother was a perfect parent. I just want that on record. I think it's, as a professional, we need to make sure that we also step back and don't overcorrect and overjudge. Because that family member is coming to us at a point in time. They have a whole history. They have a whole history of communicating. They have a whole plate that they have a dynamic that's been in place for umpteen years. So we have to honor that and gently role model and guide in a way that validates both that person who's struggling with the cognitive decline and the caregiver. Because I also believe that the caregivers have the best interest in their loved one. They've been with them the longest. And again, another family story right now. So my mother-in-law is actually living with us, sort of. She was in North Carolina, and my husband is one of 4 children, and his 3 sisters lived around her in North Carolina after my father-in-law died, and they decided that it would be best if she came and lived with us. I don't know how they decided that. Because she wasn't following their rules, and maybe I'm a little more freeform, but she didn't, again, want to go into a senior living, and we live in a condo downtown now, and we found a rental 6 floors down from us. So I became much more comfortable with piecemealing. Eventually, I think she will end up probably in an assisted living or a memory care. But you know what, right now she's safe and she's doing well, and we see eye to eye on everything. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I'm trying to walk the walk that I'm saying here. It's like, again, I'm comfortable with moving her multiple times when it's right for her point in her life. But what I'm trying to say is that if I came to you with her right now, you might tell me I'm doing the wrong thing. And what that would do is it would just straighten my back and tighten me up, and it would break down the relationship between us. And you don't ever want to do that as a professional with families that are coming, because when they finally come sometimes, and if they're brand new, it's extremely stressful. And it's they've tried what they think is everything. And what you want to do is you want to give them hope, and you want to give them tools. And you say, in my experience, this is what I've done or tried before. It doesn't always work, but you might want to just try that technique. And don't give them the laundry list of 20 things to try, because just like all of us, I've already forgot the first 3 things that you said. So you give them 1 or 2 things, and let's reconnect like in 3 or 4 days and see how that's going. Or if it's someone that's moved into your community or facility, however you define it, and you say, this is what we've been trying with your mom or dad. What do you think about that? And then it gives that person, that caregiver, also the opportunity to say, gosh, we tried that. My sister-in-law came here and she tried that and that didn't work. And then you just say, sometimes it's just a different day, and sometimes this might not work. But it's leveling the playing field so that, we're all in this together. If we're going to be partners and trusted voices together, we have to have a level playing field. So I guess maybe that's a long, roundabout way of answering that question. So, any other questions? That's okay. I'll repeat it. My sister and I are caregivers for a 90-plus-year-old mother, and we struggle with a time and a place where she is, where she thinks her parents are still alive.
and she hasn't visited him for a very long time. And we struggle with that question, weekly, daily, whatever.
I don't know if you heard the beginning part. This woman and her sister are caregivers for her 90-something-year-old mom, who talks a lot about her mom and either missing her mom, or I've got to go someplace because or mom's coming to pick me up, things like that, and how do you deal with that? And I can't tell you that's a very common thing that comes up in conversation. So one of the ways is, like let's say it's, my mom is going to pick me up. And where did you go with your mom? Where are you and your mom going? Where are you and your mom going? Meet her where she's at. And she might say, to school. So then you say, well, tell me about school. What do you do at school? What happens at school?
She wants to go visit her parents.
She wants to go visit. Anybody else run into this too? So there are some people that will say, you tell them parents are dead. Your mom died. That could cause her to be very sad. You could say your mom is away and she's not coming back, but she brought me here to take care of you and be with you. You have to play sometimes with some responses to see. I probably would not say mom's dead, but there are people that say that that's the better approach, and then you follow it with I'm here to take care of you. I would just say, your mom's away right now, so in the meantime, I'm here to talk about your mom. And then just but you're going to have the same conversation over and over again. It's not going to go away. And even if you solve it for that particular day, mom's very busy, it's going to keep coming back. Yeah. Unfortunately, but you're doing, how do you handle it? Yeah.
Sometimes we have to because it continues
Yeah.
to go and go and
Yeah.
go, and we
Yeah.
continue to get off the subject.
Yeah. And it's perfectly fine to say, mom's gone away and she asked me to take care of you. And then you try to pivot it someplace else. Does saying she's gone stop it for that day? No. It usually doesn't. Yeah.
Let's go over here.
Hello. It's well accepted what we refer to us as, and it seems like it's caregiver is
Yep.
the word. How do you suggest we refer to the person who has the
Dementia.
diagnosis
Yep.
or whatever? We seem to struggle with how to reference that person.
Yeah, it's a person with dementia. They're always a person. It's no different than a person with heart disease. She's a person, so this is Judy who has dementia. I mean, or it's just Judy. There's no reason to put the label of the diagnosis on the individual. Now, some people will disagree with that. Some people want the person to be qualified. And I'm thinking you're talking about, like, if you call someplace to make an appointment, it's my mom and she has dementia. The only thing that I would never say is that she is she has dementia. She is dementia. You want to make sure you separate that, and that's where the patient. That's why in the health system it's a patient, because a patient is all inclusive. So she is the patient if you're calling to make an appointment at a doctor's office. But yeah, but she's never her disease, or he's never hit the disease. Yeah.
How about calling them a loved one?
Loved one is perfect. Yep. Mom, dad, yeah.
To comment to the person whose mother was wanting to visit her parents, that I've worked with a lot of home care nurses that call that technique, and this is an important concept to remember, therapeutic fibbing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay, there's one right here.
Hi, you mentioned the word behaviors, which really irritates me, because we all have behaviors, and I don't understand even. I know you explained a little bit how that evolved, but it didn't make sense to me even
The
then.
symptoms, I said symptoms instead of behavior.
Do
Yeah.
you think that is changing within the health field, that term?
The
Because
behaviors?
I still hear it. Yeah. Is there? Do you know anything
I
about?
hope so. You know, see, behavior has such a negative connotation that, and that's some of our own faults in the health system. Like, we don't compliment. That's why I think I said earlier about if you're a professional caregiver and you're bringing someone in and you haven't said something positive, you go right to, that's how we've developed the negative connotation to the word behavior, because we just tend to associate it with, you know, they're wandering, they're lashing out, blah, blah. But the positive behaviors could be singing, dancing, reminiscing. Those are behaviors too. So I haven't heard any other. Has anybody heard another term besides symptoms or?
Behavioral expressions.
Behavioral expression.
Because it
Yeah.
implies there's a need.
Yeah. It's hard. It's really hard because of the negative link, I think.
Just call them challenging situations.
Challenging situations,
I think
amen.
that's
Yeah.
better. Do you know if
Yeah.
anything is changing in the
In the
terminology,
literature,
people who can actually make the change?
Yeah. I haven't heard or read anything, but
I'd
I'll
like
keep
to
my ears
see
open.
that happen.
Okay, I'll try. Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi, I have a question. My family lives out of town, and we're dealing with, as she said, challenging situations with my mother.
Look at how quickly we learn.
My sister is a primary caregiver, and my mom has senile dementia. She's starting to forget a lot of things, blaming people to change things in her house and stealing things. She lives in her own house. She refuses to even think or talk about assisted living facility, starting to be a little dangerous. And she has people that come and cleans her house, and she has fired 6 in the past 2 months. So it's getting very difficult for my sister to continue being the prime giver, because she has a family and teenager kids. And my mom does not accept anybody in her house to help her because she's in denial. She says she's perfectly fine. So how do you deal with a situation like that?
Tough love. I mean, you're describing something that I'm sure that probably a third of the folks have either dealt with here or are in the process of dealing with. What you've taken the first step, which is coming to a conference like this. So a couple of things I'm going to say, and others can feel free to chime in, because I am not the total expert on all of this stuff, but forming partnerships with other people who are in like situations, getting support, checking with the Alzheimer's Association so that they can help you navigate through how to have that difficult conversation. But it's really going to take, my recommendation would be you and your sister start going and looking at communities that your mom could move into. Now, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be probably a kicking and screaming type thing, but there's some role reversal going on now, and it's just like when you didn't want to do certain things when you were growing up, and mom kind of said, this is for your own safety, and it's for our relationship going forward so that we can be daughters and moms and enjoy our time here, and you can be safe. So that's going to be tough, and you want to make sure that you have good partners with you along the way. Would anybody else like to add something in? Go ahead. Yeah.
In the tough conversation, we had a little German lady told us the same thing, that she didn't want a caregiver. We don't use that term. We use the international term care partner.
Partner.
Because caregivers take away your independence.
Correct.
We're not doing that.
Correct. Real good
And
point.
I hope that we change that term use.
Yes. Yeah. That's a really good point, care partner. And a lot of this is about culture and it's about slow change. It takes a long time to create change, but all of us, and those of you who are walking the walk right now with somebody, you want the change today. We all do. We want the cure yesterday, but we don't have that. So in the meantime, how do we work these partnerships? And it doesn't make it any easier, but I can't emphasize enough. It's in your heart will race and you'll sweat, but in the end, it'll help bring you and your sister to a place where you can actually enjoy mom's time. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, I just had something to say about a couple things with the mother who talks about her parents. Whenever I'm working with families, I talk to them about this information that they're sharing. We know that it's not accurate, right?
Yeah.
We know that her parents are dead. Is she agitated by that information and correcting would calm her? Or is she calm with that and correcting her would agitate her? Right. And just keeping in mind as a person caring for someone, whether it be a professional or as a family member, who am I doing this for? Am I doing this because this information makes me uncomfortable and I know logically that they're not there? The other thing too, as people near end of life, to keep in mind, they might be having visions of somebody. They might actually be really thinking that they're connecting with somebody. And then as far as the term loved one, not everyone is a loved one.
Correct.
And so as a professional, keeping in mind as a professional, or even talking to other caregivers, sometimes that person was abusive or whatever, and they have to caregive for them because they're an only child or whatever. But keeping in mind, loved one can be a touchy term.
Yep. It was interesting, this gentleman one time, he was in his late 80s, and he had been caring for his wife for over 10 years, and she had pretty severe dementia, and she had some outbursts, and I said to him one time, I was like, how do you do this? And he said, well, God blessed me with deafness about the time she got... And I thought, smart. So there was one other question.
Yeah. Oh, I just had more, probably not a question, but when my husband was diagnosed with Alzheimer's a couple years ago, I kind of felt like the medical community diagnosed him and then gave him to me.
Yes, yeah.
And I felt like on that day I became the main legal person, the main financial person, and the main care partner. I became everything in one day. And I think the medical community, maybe we need something like a doula to walk alongside us when we are going through this, because it is overwhelming. Especially, I think when you have early onset Alzheimer's. I mean, my dad also had Alzheimer's, but it was a different relationship with my parents. But when you have a spouse, a young spouse, and you're thinking that really this is my retirement.
Right.
I thought I was going to travel, but I'm not. So I mean, I guess I'm searching for more than just the Alzheimer's Association. I need some medical help.
No, that's an excellent point. And that takes, again, it's a change that becomes organic within like folks like yourself. I hear exactly what you're saying, and I know when I was first taking care of my mom, I had a 12-year-old, a 10-year-old, and an 12, 10, and 8, and then my mom. And I thought, oh my God, I need support. I need somebody to help me. And I went to a support group at a church, a local church, that was for caring for aging parents. Because I thought, okay, that's where I fit in. And I went there, and everybody that was there was like my mom's age, caring for people that were in their 90s. And I thought, oh my God, what do I do? I'm trying to get kids to soccer practice and to make sure that my daughter doesn't do something wrong, that I end up with a grandchild when she's 16 years old. No one understands what I'm going through, right? And this is where, and I told you after my mom passed away, my commitment was to do some work like this. But I would say that part of this work in growing, and maybe that's what will come out of something like this, is maybe that's what, we start. We get a handful of people who are willing to come together to be a support group, and I'm sure there are support groups out there too, but it's different when it's your spouse than if you're caring for mom or dad or an uncle or something like that. And it's different if it's your sister who is, 42 years old. And you can't have individualized care groups, but there's some common themes that can come out of these care groups. So I'm going to look to see if there's any existing in the Twin Cities, and if not, maybe that's our takeaway, that we form something like that. So thank you for bringing that up. I think Joe's giving me the...
Oh, it's okay. Well, join me, everyone, in thanking Dr. Peters for this wonderful presentation. So I think, Judy, you're willing to stay around for maybe another 15 minutes or so. If anyone has questions for her, she's a wealth of knowledge and wisdom, as you can tell. We're going to take a 15-minute break. We'll convene here, let's say, between 10:15 to 10:20. I highly encourage you to visit all of the exhibitors. They're going to have a lot of great information. And we'll see you in a little bit. Thank you.